They shepherd all 70 women into 2 holding cells that are the size of broom closets. So you're standing there, sardine, for hours. No place to sit, no place to lay down with these other women. And so you get very close to people very quickly because you're in the same terrible situation together, whether you like it or not. We're all really freaked out. One of our rescuers, she's like 18. She's crying. She's having panic attacks because they keep locking the door on our little broom closet cells. And she's like, when are we going to get out of here? There were pregnant women in there. There were women who, they can't sleep. They can't sit down. They can't stand up. They can't do anything. And I'm like, they're going to miscarry. That's a prison abortion if it's a forced miscarriage. So just such horrific treatment.
You're tuning in to Unorthodoxing, the political talk show where uncommon politics finds common ground. Every week, you'll get news analysis from Mike Vick, an activist in the progressive pro-life movement with 20 years of experience in politics and journalism, as well as interviews with outside the mainstream guests you won't see on the nightly news. Get ready for an unorthodox experience. Welcome to the Unorthodoxing podcast. I'm your host, Mike Vick. We've been on hiatus during the holidays, but I'm glad to be back. We have some great interviews in store for you at the top of the year. After the news, we'll have an interview with Elise Ketch of Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, recorded shortly after her release from jail in connection with the Rescue Resurrection protests in Memphis, Tennessee. In the coming weeks, we'll bring you interviews with POW's Connie Becker, Lauren Pope, Executive Director of Rehumanize International, an interview with Jack Turnin, Chair of the American Solidarity Party, and a fascinating interview on the politics and culture of small and mid-sized brewing operations. And in the meantime, a lot has happened since the last time we spoke, so here's the latest. U.S. forces seized 2 oil tankers Wednesday. One was the Russian-flagged Marinera, intercepted in the North Atlantic. The second was the stateless M. Sophia, carrying approximately 2 million barrels of crude in the Caribbean. Now, these seizures are in connection with actions in Venezuela. The U.S. has deployed roughly 15,000 troops and a dozen warships to the region, marking the largest naval presence in the Caribbean since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Secretary of State Marco Rubio outlined a strategy for Venezuela's near future that emphasizes American control over interim authorities. The U.S. plans to seize and sell 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil at market rates. Washington, not the interim Venezuelan leadership, will control how these funds are dispersed. The plan also included market access, ensuring, quote, fair access for American and Western companies to the Venezuelan market. Also included a transition, rebuilding civil society and integrating opposition parties, though a timeline for elections has not been established. Now, as far as internal and international reactions, Venezuela's leadership has transferred to interim President Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's former VP. While she has officially taken over, she is reportedly having her decisions dictated by the United States. Meanwhile, state-run oil company PDVSA confirmed it is negotiating oil sales to the U.S. Now, there has also been a domestic crackdown, despite Maduro's ouster. Government militias called colectivos are reportedly searching citizens' phones for signs of support for the U.S. intervention. And a 90-day state of emergency has been declared. There has been political friction here in the United States. Senate Democrats have launched an investigation into whether U.S. oil companies had advanced knowledge of the raid. Additionally, some Republicans have pushed back against separate reports of Trump's interest in acquiring Greenland, calling such a move insane. As far as the global response, Russia accused the U.S. of piracy regarding the tanker seizure, while European leaders expressed solidarity with Denmark over the Greenland threats, stating that law is stronger than force. The Trump administration launched military strikes on Venezuela on January 3rd and captured President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. The operation, codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve, began around 2 a.m. local time when explosions were observed. Maduro and Flores were flown to New York City by U.S. forces. The United States government announced that Maduro and Flores had been indicted on several charges related to quote-unquote narco-terrorism, Maduro and Flores pleaded not guilty to the charges in Manhattan on January 5th. Trump and his administration justified the operation as a law enforcement action with military support that the president has, quote, inherent constitutional authority, unquote, to carry out. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez denounced the capture as a kidnapping. Venezuelan officials said at least 24 Venezuelan security officers were killed during the attack. The Cuban government said that 32 members of the Cuban military and intelligence agencies were also killed. Officials in the United Nations, the U.S., and other countries, as well as international law experts, said the raid violated the UN Charter and Venezuela's sovereignty. Many experts on U.S. constitutional law have questioned the Trump administration's broad and unprecedented claims of authority to take such actions without congressional approval or even notification. Other reactions around the world included celebrations by the Venezuelan diaspora and protests against the attack. As for my views, based on my reading of constitutional law and the War Powers Act, I believe Donald Trump should be impeached and removed from office for this action alone. I'll also note that international treaties to which we are a signatory carry the weight of constitutional law. War powers are the most deadly and gravest powers any government has. Here in America, we fought a revolution in part due to authoritarian abuses of war powers. I would say the president has once again pushed the United States into a constitutional crisis and acted in a dictatorial manner unbecoming of an American president. Now, on to our next story. On Wednesday, January 7th, an immigration and customs enforcement agent fatally shot a 37-year-old woman in Minneapolis during a massive federal immigration operation. The incident has sparked intense conflict between federal authorities and local leaders, with the city's mayor calling for the immediate removal of ICE from the city. The Department of Homeland Security and local Minneapolis officials have provided starkly different narratives regarding the events leading to the woman's death. DHS officials characterized the victim as a violent rioter who weaponized her vehicle in an attempt to run over law enforcement. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem labeled the incident an act of domestic terrorism, asserting that the officer fired defensive shots in fear for his life. As for the local perspective, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey denounced the federal narrative as BS after viewing video of the incident. He described the shooting as a reckless use of power. Police Chief Brian O'Hara noted the woman was not a target of any investigation and was shot in the head while her vehicle was attempting to drive off. The shooting occurred less than 24 hours after the Trump administration launched a large-scale immigration crackdown in Minnesota. Approximately 2,000 federal agents have been deployed to the Twin Cities for a planned 30-day operation. Federal officials state the surge is intended to, quote, root out fraud, unquote, and remove criminal illegal aliens, particularly focusing on allegations involving the Somali community. Governor Tim Walz has described the federal presence as a war being waged against Minnesota, while Representative Ilhan Omar identified the shooting victim as a legal observer monitoring ICE activity. Hundreds of demonstrators gathered at the scene. ICE reportedly used tear gas and chemical munitions to disperse crowds. The FBI and Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension have taken over the investigation into the use of deadly force. Regarding public safety, Governor Walz has placed the National Guard on alert to manage potential unrest. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said ICE is not here to cause safety in this city. What they are doing is causing chaos and distrust. As for my part, having watched the video, it's very difficult not to call the action murder. The agent or agents involved should be held accountable for their actions, and ICE should leave Minnesota immediately. Their actions are not contributing to public safety and are instead aimed entirely at inhumane treatment of migrant families in the state and have now resulted in the unnecessary death of at least one person. And now to my interview with Elise Ketch, a progressive anti-abortion uprising. Well, Elise, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. As I mentioned to you, we do like to get a little bit of a background on everyone that comes on. So I'd love to hear sort of how you ended up on the path that you're on. You are, of course, pro-life, but you are not sort of the typical pro-life person that someone might be envisioning as a stereotype in their head. So just let me know, sort of where you're coming from, how you were raised, whether you started out Democrat, Republican, Independent, and how you've ended up on the path that you're on.
So when I was little, my parents were both Republicans. My mom largely because of the pro-life issue. My dad because he's more of a true economic conservative. And so I was trained as a little kid to, vote conservatively. I remember at our school elections, I would always vote for Bush. And I thought that the other side was kind of evil, which is funny. But then my views started changing kind of in high school, just as I learned more about the world. But it really was college and going to a liberal university where I was challenged on a lot of my ideas. And I realized, oh, actually, my ideas line a lot better with being a liberal, with being a Democrat. And even then, I knew that I was still pro-life because my family was pro-life because we were Catholic, but also because my mom knew the reality of abortion. She'd seen pictures of abortions and knew how they were done and thought that was wrong. And she taught me early on about embryology. Like, I'm the oldest of 4 children. And every time we had another baby, she'd bring out, I actually have the book on my shelf, A Child is Born, the Leonard Nilsson book, and show me exactly what my sibling looked like at that age. And I'd be like, oh, wow, they look like a little shrimp. But in my head, I was like, okay, a little shrimp is a person. Like that connection was made intuitively, So because that little shrimp is my sibling. So that gave me an early fondness for prenatal life, just that intuitive understanding. So I brought that into college with me, and I couldn't really shake it. Even when I heard all these bodily autonomy arguments, it just kept coming back to me. These arguments don't make sense if the fetus is a person. If the fetus is a person, then that just creates a whole set of obligations that ultimately override bodily autonomy and then also constitutes violence. If you start to bring in a person, then abortion becomes violence. And violence isn't justified except under, proportionate and extreme circumstances. So I just couldn't buy into the my body, my choice thing. It was 2017 when the Women's March happened. I was talking to my girlfriend at the time about abortion. She was Catholic too. I thought that meant she was pro-life. And then I find out she tells me in her words, I just don't think abortion is a big deal. And I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout. I was like, how can ending a life in a brutal way not be a big deal? Like, how can you say that? So then it really challenged me. I had to go into my thoughts and be like, look, I do believe in separation of church and state. So if I don't have a good secular argument outside of Catholicism for why we need to protect prenatal life, then I'm on the wrong side and I need to switch sides. So I found secular pro-life online by literally Googling secular pro-life into the search bar and on Facebook too. I think I typed it right into the Facebook bar and found it. And then I saw they had these great arguments explaining why, especially that Guttmacher study on unsafe abortions was just not a very good study and didn't really prove anything. And once I had that information, once I was armed with that analysis, I was like, okay, like the biggest argument against abortion that it was convincing to me, or for abortion that was convincing to me, was that it's unsafe. I mean, it's unsafe to not have safe abortions. You will kill women if you don't have safe abortions, if you don't have abortion access. But finding out from secular pro-life that just wasn't true, I suddenly was like, I feel very confident. And then I learned about new wave feminists who had gotten kicked out of the Women's March. And there was a big brouhaha about that. And then I started reading the feminist arguments against abortion through them. And I decided I'm going to compile all of these arguments. I'm going to compile them into a bunch of Facebook posts and then post them so that my friends know my views and so that they hear an alternative view of why abortion is wrong. And I really want people to hear this. So I did that. It challenged a lot of people. I ultimately ended up putting those posts on a Tumblr, and the Tumblr got big later. But yeah, that was my basis for remaining pro-life in college. So I very nearly flipped to being pro-choice, but I didn't. But my liberal views stuck. I still was like, I believe in gay rights because obviously I am gay. Well, I'm bisexual, but
Mhm.
and I believe in like green justice, economic justice, and I mean, I guess everyone believes in economic justice, but I believe in it in a very liberal way. And then I was really into the racial justice stuff, and that ultimately took me over in 2020. So in 2020, that's where I really got radicalized. At first I was like pretty liberal about the police. I was like, I can see why the police would need reform, but do we really have to get rid of them? And then a friend explained to me, she had like this little zine about it. She's like, you have to imagine a world without police and then understand why it would be better and then understand why the police are bad. And once I actually understood all those things, I was like, you're right. I'm against the police now. So that's when I started becoming radical leftist.
Yeah.
Then I took on also, wait, this idea that we could have a better world without prisons. So prison abolition became part of my stance. And then I started protesting out in the streets. And that really radicalized me too. I started to believe in nonviolent direct action without even knowing that's what it was called. I was just doing it.
Mhm.
So here I am helping tear down the statues, the Confederate statues on Monument Avenue in Richmond, Virginia. That was really exciting. And then a few years later, I hear that there's this big case coming up in the Supreme Court that might turn over Roe versus Wade. And that was in 2021. And I realized I got to speak out again. I got to say my views because I'm the only person in my circles who will state these views and state them in a way that's coherent with a leftist vision of the world. So then I started to post on my Instagram story some of my ideas about why abortion is bad, but from a leftist point of view. And that got a lot of pushback, but it also got a lot of reception. And then I started to enter the pro-life left community and found out that there was a pro-life left. And that was a big deal for me, really. So that's kind of how I ended up here. That's how I got radicalized to the left. And that's how I got radicalized on abortion.
Well, it's a fascinating journey. I'm curious for folks who, are uh, coming at this from, you had mentioned that you had studied the sort of secular arguments, but you were raised Catholic. Do you still identify as Catholic?
Yeah, I do. I go to mass every day. So
Well, that's great.
I don't hate to say it. Like, I like being Catholic. I love being Catholic. That's why I go to mass every day. But I'm embarrassed to say it because I know I'm going to get stereotyped for it?
Sure, sure. But I mean, I think that it's good to realize that it's actually okay to have a religious perspective. But I think that certainly as you say, you did take the time to sort of learn a more secular argument in favor of the views that you hold. Delving into some of the work that you've done, you mentioned doing nonviolent direct action. You've been arrested a number of times. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been arrested 4 times.
Yeah. What's that experience like? I mean, I can't imagine it's pleasant, but you're doing it for a cause. Have you been in jail for a good length of time, or were you arrested and released almost immediately? What was that experience like? I'm sure it was different all 4 times, but I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so 3 times I've been arrested under the forfeit rule. It's post and forfeit rule. That's a part of DC's protesting culture because there's so many protesters here. They just can't prosecute every single one. So what you do is you post a fine. So you basically pay a small bail. And then when you don't show up to court, you forfeit the post. So you forfeit the bail, whatever you call it. So it's like $50. So it's like a traffic ticket, and then it's basically washed from your record. It's just like a misdemeanor, and it's basically registers as a moving violation.
Mhm.
So 3 times in DC, I twice for blocking the road, once for sitting on the sidewalk in front of the White House. I got arrested. You know what? It's kind of fun to be like yelling, to be like, I'm against the man here, and then to be sitting in the paddy wagon with your friends and you start stomping your feet and singing and, just trying to keep the morale up. And once you're actually in jail, it kind of sucks. Like it's like 3 hours when you're in DC jail of just sitting there in a white box and I'm like praying rosaries in the box
Mhm.
or,
Mhm.
sleeping, maybe taking a little nappy. And so that's how that one goes. It's pretty painless. So you're released almost immediately. Like I said, like 3 hours is the worst I think I've had. Also had faster where it was like 30 minutes and that, yeah. So DC's super efficient about it. But recently, so on December 5th, I got arrested for allegedly blockading an abortion clinic and being a part of a physical bodily blockade. And I got sent away to Shelby County Jail in Memphis, and it was a horrific experience. And that was 24 hours long, and worst 24 hours of my life, honestly, like torturous. And I witnessed so many human rights violations in that jail. And I know those are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the prison industrial complex, you know? So I was just seeing what an overcrowded jail because of ICE looks like. We were told that ICE was filling up the city jails, the Memphis jails. That's why we got sent to the county jail. And the county jail was also overfull at that point. So it was just a brutal process of like being herded like cattle and treated like cattle. And I can get more into the specifics about what exactly happened, but yeah, it was one of the worst. And I talked to some other veteran rescuers, I would call them, people who've been arrested like 60 times, about their experience while we were sitting there because they got arrested with us. And they were like, out of all my jail experiences, I think this one is the worst. This is terrible.
Wow.
This is
Wow.
really, really bad. And it was just a horrendous thing to watch people get so dehumanized and to be so dehumanized and to wonder, when am I going to get out of this and be treated like a human again? And so, and like it's crazy that we treat people who haven't even been convicted of a crime, who have only been accused. We're treating people like this. And some, of course there are women in there who claim that they're innocent, and I don't know who's innocent or not. I'm not the judge of that. But I mean, imagine that they are innocent and they've been sitting in that jail waiting to be processed for up to 4 weeks. That's
Wow.
horrific. And it's like a waiting room from hell. That's really what it was. It was like a doctor's waiting room, but from hell.
Walk me through that 24 hours, as best as you can. I hate to bring up, because it was obviously, as you say it, and I can sense it, a traumatic experience. But if you're willing to
Yeah.
walk me through it, I think that, it would definitely help people to understand what people go through.
Yeah, for sure. So first we arrived there. Well, actually, no, really the abuse kind of started in the paddy wagon. So we started by getting loaded into a very weird paddy wagon where we each had an individual cell that we sat in, and we're sitting there handcuffed. And luckily my cuffs weren't too tight, but for people that had them on tightly, I bet that really was like hurting them. And you're sitting there for a while just waiting for the freaking truck to move. And then finally the wagon moves, you get transported, then you get out. You walk into the waiting room of the jail. The processing room is, I guess, what I would call it. And they start by, stripping you of all your extra layers of clothing. They make you strip down to one layer per, part of your body. And they took away my shoes. I had on my cool Doc Martens, and they gave me orange Crocs, and that sucked. They were fine, I guess. The Crocs were comfy at least, but that was okay. What really started to go wrong was they moved us to the main part of the waiting area of the processing room. And it's like 60 blue plastic chairs, and they're kind of tub shaped. And there's like 70 women in the room. So some of them also have to sit on not tub shaped chairs. They're just on regular plastic chairs that they've scattered throughout the edge of the room. And we're all crammed in here. And the only thing we're allowed to really do is watch the stupid TV. And the stupid TV is super tiny, hard to hear. And then also it's playing R-rated films that are like very racist. Like, what is going on? I
Wow.
guess they weren't racist, but they definitely were like playing on racial stereotypes. They were not good.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what are we doing here? And then I'm like, I try to get up and stretch. The guard starts yelling at me, sit down, sit down. I'm like, okay, I'm not allowed to get up. She's like, you can get up for water. You can get up to the bathroom. Don't get up otherwise. So I'm like, okay, I'm stuck in this chair. What can I do? I try to put my feet up, and then it's put your feet down. Put your feet down. Do not put your feet on the furniture. So I'm like, okay, I can't curl up in a ball and fall asleep. What am I going to do? How am I going to sleep eventually? I wanted to take a nap. Like, I really wanted a nap at that point in time. And it was early in the day then. It was only like 11 a.m. when we got in. And so they gave us like bland rice and salty hot dogs for lunch, and ate as much of it as I could, called it good. They gave us our first phone calls, and not all of us in the group got to have our first phone call. I just got called up first. And the phones are, of course, terrible. They don't work well. The person on the other end of the line has to pay for it. So
Mhm.
if they can't input their credit card information in time, or the system just doesn't register it properly, it'll hang up on you. So I couldn't reach my family. I finally reached my friend Robert, and Robert like calmed me down, and I was like, Robert, I don't have my medication. And I had just found out that some of these women had been in there for up to 4 weeks. And I was like, I don't have my medication. What am I going to do? I thought I was going to be out of here in a few hours. I didn't realize we might be held here a lot longer. I had already been aware it was Friday, and I already was aware I might be staying till Monday. And I was like, that's not the end of the world, but 4 weeks sounded like the end of the world. I was like, I don't think I can do this. That's not what I signed up for. So at that point, you're already in it and you just have to accept it and kind of register it as a sacrifice. So all of us rescuers are really scared at that point, and we're all praying together. We're saying rosaries together, and people are finding out. We're talking to some of the people sitting next to us. We're allowed to talk softly to them, and they learned that we protested abortion, and most of them were very supportive. That was actually quite inspiring, that all these women who are the poorest of the poor and the forgotten of the forgotten, they are in the worst ranks of society. They're like, no, you did something right, girl. Abortion sucks. And a lot of them would be like, I had like 4 abortions because my boyfriend wanted to kill me, and I wish it had never happened. I want my babies. One of them was even like, I would come out there and protest with you. Can I have your information later so I can come out when I'm out of here? So that was really cool. Some of them even wanted to learn how to pray from us. So we taught some girls. So there were moments of grace where we were able to minister to people. But oh my gosh, the girls who had been sitting there for like a few days to a few weeks, they would show us their ankles and they were swollen round because they weren't allowed to move. It
Yeah.
was so bad. One girl, she was like, I'm at risk of blood clots. I have to put my feet up, but they won't give me a chair to put my feet up on. She's like, they only gave me an ice pack. And it's like, you need medical attention and they won't give it to you. And then there were girls in solitary behind us. And so there were like 2 or 3 solitary tanks behind us. And there was a girl in one of them, and she's pounding on the door and she's screaming. She's like, I have to use the bathroom. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. I'm going to lose it. I cannot wait. And the guards just keep shaking their heads. And we go to the guards. We're like, excuse us, but like, there's someone that needs to use the bathroom here. And they're like, she's been saying that all day. She doesn't need to. And then we come to find out she's basically herself. Sorry to use a bad word.
No,
She
it's
has,
okay.
defecated on herself. And then we all have to go into these holding cells while they clean it up. So they shepherd all 70 women into 2 holding cells that are the size of broom closets. So you're standing there, sardine, for hours, no place to sit, no place to lay down with these other women. And so you get very close to people very quickly because you're in the same terrible situation together, whether you like it or not. And you have no idea when you're going to get out because you don't know how fast your processing is going to go. Is it going to be hours? Is it going to be days? So we're praying intensely at that point. We're all really freaked out. One of our rescuers, she's like 18. She's crying. She's having panic attacks because they keep locking the door on our little broom closet cells. And she's like, when are we going to get out of here? So eventually they release us again back into the waiting room. We claim our seats. They give us one last meal for dinner at 5 p.m. And then they're like, you don't get food until 8 a.m. tomorrow. That's 15 hours. And we're not able to sleep. We can't
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah.
And because you can't lay down anywhere and you can't just be sitting up in the chair. So you don't sleep. One lady was like, I haven't slept in 7 days. I was like, oh, what am I going to do? So girls would sleep on the floor in the holding cells when they got the chance, if they could. But like I said, there wasn't a lot of room. Like one girl could lay down, maybe, not many. And you would just have to like splay yourself weird in the chair and like stick your legs out. And it was so bad. And then part of my trauma of it was I found out that my fingerprints had been flagged in the system for some reason. And so I was like, am I in trouble for something else? And I was freaking out. I was like, does this mean I'm not going to get out of here with everybody else? Are they going to keep me? Am I going to be sent to a different prison? What's going to happen? And eventually they finally do call me back for processing after I had to like beg the front desk people and be like, I haven't been processed yet. Please, I need to know when I'm going to get processed. And finally, so I do get processed and I find out I'm getting out with everybody else at the same time. That was a huge relief. But for those few hours where I wasn't sure, I was in panic mode. I was like, I cannot do this. I really can't. And there were pregnant women in there.
Yeah.
There were women who they can't sleep, they can't sit down, they can't stand up, they can't do anything. And I'm like, they're gonna miscarry. That's a prison abortion if it's a forced miscarriage. So just such horrific treatment. And yeah, so by 8 a.m. the next day, I'm starving, I'm freezing. Oh, and it's so cold and they don't give anyone jackets because we don't have enough jackets for everyone. So none of you get a jacket. They've been threatening us all night to put us in the cage outside in the cold because there is a cage outside in the cold if you're really bad. They threatened to mace us if we acted up. And if one person acted up, everybody got maced. That was really bad. The fire alarm would go off throughout random times of the night for several minutes. So you would just be sitting there with the fire alarm going off for a while, just like psychological torture. And yeah, it was just like this most horrific set of circumstances. So it was quite traumatic for 24 hours. We got out, about the same time we got in the next day. And I was so grateful. I was so grateful. Never felt so much relief and gratitude towards God than that point in time. So, and we walked out of there with having already promised the women while we were like sitting in the cells, like, we're going to protest for you too. Like, we're fighting for you next. Well, or at the same time, basically. So we're already filing a lawsuit against the prison, and we'll see if it goes anywhere. I mean, it's really hard to say. These jails have been this way for so long, and they're just getting worse because of the influx of criminals due to ICE raids and the National Guard occupying the city. So it it's really bad. So I walk out of there as a leftist, just all the more convinced that prisons shouldn't exist. But I noticed that my conservative friends who are there with me, they walk out of there very convinced on prison reform. And I was like, that's great. That's a
Yeah.
kind of a liberal take. And I like that in you. I like seeing that in you. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the full story of the human rights horror vision that I saw that day.
I mean,
Yeah.
what you're describing is psychological torture. Were you hurt as well, or did you see anyone get hurt physically?
Yeah, one girl got beaten by a guard. I think she might have thrown a punch at the guard first, but then the guard started beating her back. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was bad. Other than that, I didn't really get hurt other than, being hurt by the sheer amount of time I had to spend in a plastic chair. Like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
physically hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And I did see video of you getting drug out to be arrested. I mean, obviously, I assume that's because you went limp as part of the protest.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Okay. I was just
Yeah,
curious.
that is correct. I went limp. And so I went limp because it's supposed to buy more time for the babies. It's supposed to show resistance. It's supposed
Sure.
to be a nonviolent way of non-cooperating. So it destroyed my shoes. That made me sad, but
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was intentional. And it didn't hurt me too bad. I know some people have been really hurt when they get dragged, but they held me okay. They dropped me at one point in time, but I didn't get
I
hurt.
saw that.
Luckily, I had on a big poofy jacket, so I was
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, the only time they were really rough with me, like, slammed me on the car hood of the police car. That was
Wow.
weird.
Okay.
Yeah. And that
Is
that's
that
not in
the
the video.
is that the worst that you've experienced in terms of being arrested? Like, just the arrest part of it?
Yeah, because I've never gone limp before, so that's definitely, like, the most handling I've had by a police officer before. Otherwise, it's usually pretty gentle, especially in DC. They just pat you down and then put you in handcuffs, so yeah.
How long were you all in front of the Planned Parenthood?
Not very long. I feel like it was, like, 15 minutes.
Yeah. And you marched before that,
It might have been
correct?
less. Oh, we marched to the Planned Parenthood from the parking lot across the street. So it was like a minute of marching, really, and then maybe only like 5 minutes in front of the Planned Parenthood, honestly. It was really more of a demonstration than an effective blockade. And we've talked about that since then, like how we could make it more effective in the future if we allegedly do that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I assume police were waiting there?
Yeah, there were police waiting there. I think yeah, there were because we had tried to allegedly pull a car up to the back door to block the back door, and that didn't work out the way we wanted it to. And then they called the police at that point and were like, there's these people trying to, do XYZ. So I'm pretty sure the police were already there by the time we marched over.
So, where can people find you online? Social media, your portfolio, whatever it is that you have out there that you want people to know about, where can they find it?
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram at anti-personhood. I promise that means I am pro fetal personhood. It's a different argument. Anyhow. And then I am secular pro-life conspectus on Tumblr. Terrible username, I know. I think you can also find me by typing in anti-personhood on Tumblr, but then you can find my website, which is eliseketch.portfolio.com or something like that. No, .myportfolio.com. And then, yeah, I guess those are the main places you can find me. And then you can read my book, Rebuilding Pro-Life Nonviolence, which is available on Amazon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, Elise. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you again to Elise for coming on. We'll have links in the show notes to everywhere you can follow Elise online. A few programming notes. One, we have new studio quality lighting, so a big shout out to my dad, James Vick, for a wonderful Christmas present. Because of this, I'm able to no longer use a virtual background, but as you can see, I'm still playing around with the setup. I'm hoping to have something a little more presentable next week. Stay tuned, and thank you for bearing with me. The episodes are intended to be weekly, but as I continue to adjust to having a podcast, I appreciate your patience if they don't come out on the same day of the week. I'm striving for a Tuesday release schedule, but depending on other factors, it may be released on another day. We'll have 2 bonus episodes headed your way on Patreon and Substack. Head there and support the show, which helps keep the lights on and the cameras rolling. You can always find the show on my website, votevickusa.com. That's V as in Victor, O-T-E, B as in Victor, I-C-K, USA.com. And follow me everywhere on social media at linktree.com/VoteVicUSA. You can find links to the show there as well. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Wherever you find the show, subscribing and leaving a positive review is always a big help, so thank you for that. On social media, your likes and shares make a big deal to getting our podcast in front of your friends, so please do that everywhere you can. Next week, look for my interview with pro-life and racial justice activist Connie Becker. Until next time, Unorthodoxers, you stay faithful.